Hello and welcome to episode 5 of the Alone podcast. Again, I'm going to say I'm super excited for this episode and for this conversation. It's probably a time to hang it up if I ever say I'm not excited, but I'm truly excited and humbled for this opportunity. So our guest today is Mike Lowe. Mike was a participant in season 2 of Alone, and Mike, just super excited to have you here today, and thank you so much for being here.
Hey, I'm really happy to be a part of it too. I've enjoyed all the ones that you've done before, and thankful for what you're doing. I know there's a lot of folks out there who appreciate getting to know a little bit more about the people they watched on TV and appreciated or hated, whichever one it was. And so, thanks for doing it.
No, I appreciate it, and really I have to owe you a big piece of gratitude as well, because I've never done this before. I'm not a podcaster, right? I've got a normal full-time job, and I had this idea of something that was going to be interesting to me, and I hoped it would be interesting to other people. Obviously, what I'm doing is completely dependent upon people like yourself, Mike, and other participants from the show being willing to sit down and share with a complete stranger, and two, a complete nobody. But very quickly, you commented and interacted with some of the posts that were out there, and mentioned how supportive and excited you were for this project that I'm starting.
Mm-hmm.
And, that did a few things for me. One, it gave me another episode to record, so thank you. But two, it gave me the support and helped me see that, okay, like, this project is of value to somebody, and this is something that that is important and is worthwhile. So, I'm really grateful, and you obviously, you wouldn't have known how important that was, but it kind of came at a time when I was just thinking, like, man, this is, I've done 2 episodes, and maybe this just isn't going to happen, because I wasn't hearing back from, many people. But now I've got like a 2-month backlog on people that I need to get through. So anyways, thank you again for that early support, and for being here today. It really means the world to me.
Well, yeah, and us too. Barbara and I in particular. But I just wanted to comment on what you said there, and you referred to yourself as the nobody. And in one sense, I understand what you mean, but in another sense, it takes a somebody to want to do what you're doing, and the fact that you care enough to do this is heartwarming and endearing for me. So thank you.
No, I appreciate that. Well, let me just see where we're at here, and see where to start off. So I think, first of all, when I rewatched your Alone kind of bio, what I like to do before an episode is I like to go back through and watch, everyone's little pieces throughout the season, and just kind of get reacquainted with the individual. And obviously a big part of that is reading through the bio of the individual, or listening rather to the bio of the individual that's put on the show. And I have to tell you, I had forgotten a lot of what you shared in your video introduction on the show, and I rewatching that has humbled me again, and just I don't want to keep going with the gratitude, but I'm really excited to hear what you have to say. And so I think we'll just start with who you are and where you come from. So who are you and where do you come from?
So I was born in '60 in California, and so that should help people understand a lot of things about me, because that did shape who I am to a large degree. Of course, this part you heard on television. My parents early on were unready to be parents, and our relatives were unready to step in, though they tried. And I, looking back on that, appreciate all of the hard work that they put in trying to keep us 3 boys together. So then it seemed like the best thing to do was for us to be in an orphanage in Nebraska Father Flanagan's Boys Town. And so that has a lot to do with, the whole survival interest, surviving emotionally as a human being. Nobody, wants to be raised in an orphanage unless it's the only option. And so in our taste, it turned out to be the best option, for reasons that everybody involved had come to terms with. And I was an adult before I came to terms with it. In fact, it wasn't until I accepted Jesus Christ as my friend and Savior that I was able to be in an emotional place to be able to understand it to some degree, to the point where I can, forgive and to live and to appreciate how hard it was for them, not to just look at it from my perspective. So it's all a survival attitude. When life is tough, what do? Do you give up and hope to die, or do you fight all the harder to live on this planet? And there's a lot of different ways to live on this planet. And one way is in an orphanage. Another way is to run away from the orphanage. Another way is to get kicked out of the orphanage. And for me, that's what happened. At a certain point, the orphanage said, Mike, your behavior is just inconsistent with Boys Town's aims and goals, and you're going to have to go. And so that was another, difficult challenge. Where do you go when the orphanage kicks you out? And you're only 15 years old. Well, fortunately, my dad's sister and her husband invited me to live with them in Colorado. Turns out that my uncle is a huge outdoor fan. So in 1975, John Denver was making being outdoors really exciting and popular again, as well as Tom Brown and Larry Dean Olson. There was a resurgence, and that is still going on to this day. Fortunately, popular survival shows have kept it going. And so at 15, I started living in the wilderness, and spending a lot of time out there, how to get by without modern conveniences. And then I graduated high school, did a little bit of playing around for 2 years, joined the U.S. Air Force to teach wilderness survival to pilots and aircrew members. And that was the most exciting thing in my life up to that point. And to get paid to take 10 people into the wilderness and show them how to survive behind enemy lines, to make it even more difficult, was truly the best thing that had ever happened in my life. And it continues to be one of the best things. Of course, now, being married, having children and grandchildren is definitely the best thing in my life. Having a relationship with Jesus is the ultimate. And then owning my own survival school. I got out of the Air Force after 8 years of teaching. Was uninterested in supervising or flying a desk. Is the expression we use in the Air Force. So then I got out of the military and started Wilderness Way Adventures. And for the last 33 years now, I've been, teaching through Wilderness Way Adventures, traveling all over the country, meeting different people in different situations, actually traveling through North and South America. Such a blessing, to be able to reach people in the wilderness. People seem to be better off in the wilderness, and that's becoming more and more evident because of the COVID, forcing people to not meet indoors but to meet outdoors. And so that meant there's more climbers and more boaters, more bikers, and more people interested in bushcraft and survival. And so it is a great thing that TV shows like Alone popped up with this great interest. And so now people can watch folks, ordinary people, surviving filming themselves, and the editing is all over the map. They got 10 people doing a TV show, and they want to tell 10 different stories. Of course, we are filming ourselves, and that part is absolutely true. But in the editing room, they could choose a storyline that's unique to what they've seen in the footage that we've supplied. And that's really a neat thing that they do. So you're not seeing the same story over and over and over and over again. I think if they had edited that way, we probably wouldn't be anticipating season 9 right now.
Yeah.
So they're doing a great job. Not every time does it feel like a great job when you watch it, what they've done with what you provided in the wilderness, and you see it. Because all of us, the first time we see ourselves on TV is when it airs. We have no participation in the editing. They don't consult with us and ask us, is this storyline okay with you? They just, whatever they want to tell is what they do. And in my case, I was very thankful that they portrayed me as a clever, competent camper, like the professor on Gilligan's Island, who loved his wife dearly and went home for that reason. And I'm thankful for that. The storyline is a tiny bit different than that, and I've shared it online many times, and people who follow me on the line or the alone discussion groups and things, that the real reason I went home is when they told us that the real reason I went home on day 21 is 2 days before they inserted us, the game and fish guy came and says, so you basically can't eat anything that has fur and feathers. That's off the list. And that's a frustrating thing, because I actually wanted to do well out there, but I didn't want to, submit or subject my body to the ravages of voluntarily starving or, pushing through malnutrition. I was 55 when I did the show, and I just unlikely that you can recover very well from doing that. So I told him I wasn't interested in doing the show. We had 2 really good alternates, Larry being one of them. I wanted Larry to take my place, and they said, Mike, please, you've got to do this. We need an old fart to do this show. And I was like, well, gee, thanks for that. Let me pray about it. And so I did. And after, talking it over with Jesus, I felt impressed. You know what? I can give these guys 21 days as an old fart, and then they can do with that as they will. And so that's what I told them. They were very, very thankful. And so that's why I went home on day 21, is because that's the day I picked in advance. But it doesn't take away from the fact that I missed my wife terribly on TV. I admitted that I felt like I was having a heart attack for the first 5 days. And then finally that quit happening. And then I was perfectly fine for the remaining 16 days. So yeah, what a great story they told, and it is fun to watch it and to see some of the creations I came up with. I can stop right here, and if you got a question that you want me to address before I move on, but I can just go nonstop without you ever asking a question. But that's not a very good interview.
There's a couple of things that I want to circle back on some stuff, and I'll ask the pertinent question at this point. So, you had that conversation, and you felt that you were to stay. Sometimes following what I would call inspiration leads to an education or an enrichment moment for us as people, right? When we listen to that call. Did you have anything like that when you made that decision to listen and to stay that you're able to share?
There were some things that I had not experienced before. I've done quite a few over the years, doing this, teaching professionally for 41 years, I have experienced a lot of solo outings, never more than 3 weeks, though. That was the longest. I've done several of those. But having to film it for a TV show, knowing that millions of people were going to watch it around the world, really created an impact that I did not really appreciate just how much it would affect me while out there. Being a teacher and instructor all of my adult life, I'm mindful of my students. I'm careful what I say and what I do and how I interact with them. There's always a level of professionalism. At the same time, I want to be personable and so they feel like we're friends too. That was a little bit different in the military. I was always Sergeant Lowe and they were the student, and there was that kind of a barrier there that existed because that's the way the military rolls. But as a civilian, you still want to maintain professionalism, but at the same time connect as friends. And so I take it very seriously when I'm teaching. And so while the whole time I was out there, I was still in instructor mode. And so I was instructing people through the camera, and it never occurred to me how impactful that is in that situation, in that scenario where I'm setting up all these cameras, and each time I set them up, and it was very tedious and burdensome many times, because I wanted this to be the very best learning for the people watching. And so I would put myself in the viewer's position and say, okay, if I was watching this, listening to what Mike is saying or showing or doing, then I would want to be able to see it from this angle, this angle, and that angle, so that I get the best feel for it. And then, of course, when you take the time to set everything up like that, then you're also hoping that in the editing room, when production is putting together my story, that they will have a sense of what I was trying to do for the viewers, and that they would include those same views and all the hard work that I put into it, so that people watching could feel like they were there and that they understand what I'm showing and doing and saying. Because I wasn't out there surviving per se, even though I really was doing that. I was teaching, and that's totally different than just living off the land. When you watch Roland, for example, Roland in season 7 was truly surviving, and he was not teaching, and you get a wonderful perspective watching Roland. And in my case, everything I was doing was to teach, and I couldn't get out of that mindset. And so that was shocking for me to realize that I can't not be a teacher for whatever reason. Now, my wife makes sure that I am not her teacher. She says, honey, stop. You're not my teacher. I'm not your student. Let's relate on a husband and wife level here. And so she's very good at making sure that I'm not in teacher mode all the time. But out there, I truly was. Another thing that I did not anticipate was the value of talking out loud to God. And that, normally when I pray to God, I'm just talking to him inside my head. I don't talk out loud. But during those 21 days out there, and I hadn't done this before when I've done other 21 days solo in the wilderness, but talking out loud to God had a tenfold effect. Talking to God has a wonderful effect. Talking to God out loud, filming myself doing a survival show for millions of people to watch, was phenomenal. And I did not ever foresee that being a reality. Of course, the other reason why I was talking out loud is so that when I came around a corner, I didn't startle a bear and create a rotten environment for him and me. Speaking of bears, my bears never left. The entire time I was, when you're watching the TV show, you see we're flying in by the helicopter, you see 3 bears on the beach, and then that's right where they land. And then those 3 bears fled into the forest. They dropped me off just minutes after they had gone. I was thinking, let's fly around a little while up here before we land. But no, they just went and landed. The bears, were right close. I mean, they were in the forest. I couldn't see them, but you could hear them. And when the helicopter flew away, we had to film it and then share our thoughts as it was leaving. And then as soon as the helicopter was gone and I did that part, I turned around and you could see trees that were over 100 feet tall swaying because the bears in there were banging into them. And I'm thinking to myself, it's like, that's a big tree. And it would take a big bear to bump into it and make it sway that much. And so, man, that freaked me out for a second. I was like, whoa, those bears, they could swing and miss me by a few inches, and the wind would kill me, And I was like, goodness gracious. So I just hollered out to the bears, I don't know where this came from. It's just some primal thing. And I said, hey, bears, I love you. Jesus loves you. I am not going to exploit you. I promise to not film you or to try to take advantage of you in any way. And in exchange for that, please don't kill me. And then that's how I rolled from then on. I never once tried to take pictures or video of the bears, and I saw them a lot. In fact, every night, I moved to my permanent site on day 5, and that's the main shelter that you see throughout the series. At the very beginning, when I'm laying in my tent, I'm describing how I feel like I'm having a heart attack. That was my temporary shelter before I picked out my permanent. So in my permanent site, every night at about 9 o'clock, the bears, 6 bears, 4 of them large, 2 of them still large, but not nearly as large. Probably the bigger ones were in the 4, maybe 500-pound range. The smaller ones were probably 350, which in the lower 48, that's still a massive bear.
Yeah.
And they would come by and had no idea. I've never heard bears make this sound before. But just right behind my tarp shelter, about 6 feet away, the bears had created a new path. Because I looked at where the bear trails were, and there was one way over there and one over here. And I thought, okay, I can put my shelter here, and I will not be in any danger of the bears going back and forth on their established trails. Well, they created a whole new one that went behind my shelter only 6 feet away. And so then they would come single file, and they would be making this mewing sound like kittens. They were going, and then they would get right abreast of my shelter, and they would stop, and then they would sniff. And then they would take off. And each one of the bears would come and do that. Mew, 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 stop, sniff, 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 mew, 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 and move on. And every night they did that at 9 o'clock, going down to the beach to forage. And then about 4 o'clock, between 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, they'd go right back by and do the same thing all over again in reverse. And they did that every night until I left. And at first I was a bit nervous, but then I realized that these bears were cool with me being there, that they weren't afraid of me and felt like they needed to move somewhere else, but they just stayed the whole time. And I think they did that for Nicole as well. I haven't had a chance to ask her about that. I forgot to the other day. And I think her bears stayed, but pretty sure most of the bears left, just did not stay around. And so that kind of made me feel good to think that, these 6 bears accepted me, chose not to beat me up or to threaten me in any way. And I never once felt, I so much wanted to. There was a couple nights there where I thought, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead and and put the infrared on with the audio. I was going to put the lab mic close to the trail where they would stop and do the mew mew sniff sniff sniff. I wanted to at least catch the audio if I couldn't get a good video of it. But I remembered, I promised these guys I would not exploit them, so I didn't. And it all appeared to work out well, So being on the show, making that decision to do 21 days, had another side effect in that I was counting down, whereas nobody else could do that. Nobody else that I know of picked departing date, the day that they would stop and go home. And so it was probably 100 times easier for me knowing that I was counting down to day 21. In fact, morning and evening, we had to do our interview with the audience to the camera by saying, all right, guys, I had a great night of sleep. Here's what happened last night while the cameras were off. And for today, here's what I'm going to do. And then at the end of the day, you'd say, well, here's what I accomplished. And really, and then you just share some thoughts and, hopefully it was, usable and interesting to people. And so every morning I would say, all right, today is day 15. I've only got 6 more days to go. And then I'm going to be back home and I'll be done with this. And then in the evening, I'd say, okay, that pretty much wraps up day 15. Tomorrow is day 16. So we'll see you then. And they, of course, in editing, they eliminated all of that. And because they didn't want anybody, number one, to know that we couldn't hunt anything with fur or feathers. And number two, they didn't want to know that I was counting down that I had chosen day 21 in advance. And to tell you the truth, though, the story that they did tell, and I hate to say this, but it's what happened, is they created sentences that made it sound like at the end where I say, I don't think I can do this anymore. I miss Barbara too much. They took some license in editing to portray it that way, because I actually never said it that way. But other than that, them portraying me that, I just miss Barbara too much. I feel like I'm wasting resources and time out here. I miss Barbara. I'm just going to go home now. I've learned all I can. I've poured my heart and soul into this, for those of you watching. So it's just time to go home. And to add that, I miss my wife a lot. Just don't think I can do this anymore without her. It's actually a better story than the truth. So God bless them for thinking that up,
I was just going to say, your relationship is obviously in a very good place that you didn't need to keep those bonus points with your wife.
Oh, right. Oh, a funny thing is, after watching season 1, when they called me for season 2, my wife Barbara, whose name is more known than my own. It's funny.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be in the airport traveling somewhere to teach, and someone will recognize me and they'll come up and say, "Dude, man, what you did on that show was amazing. Barbara, must be a wonderful woman." And so, what was your name again? You hit it. My name is Barbara's husband. That's pretty much who I am. And so it's really cool for me to know that people don't remember my name, but they remember her name. So I like that a lot. But anyhow, so Barbara tells me when they called to say, "Mike, we'd like you to do the show." And she says, "All right, I'd be willing for you to do that, but two things you have to do for me. Number one is don't complain about the weather on camera, and don't come home because you miss me." And now we're watching it, and then we're both shocked to see that the reason why I go home is because I miss my wife. And I was like, "Whoop, baby, I did not say that. I promise I didn't say that."
So you're telling them the real story is a survival mechanism more than anything else. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
It's not that you needed to keep bonus points. It's that you need, honey. I promise. This is not why I came home. That's funny.
Yeah,
That's really funny.
Yeah, it is too funny. Yeah, no, Barbara and I are as you can well imagine, and anybody who follows me on Facebook, I don't do any other social media other than Facebook, and people are very aware of the fact that Barbara and I are wildly in love. We just celebrated our 18th anniversary the other day, and it still feels like a honeymoon. So obviously it was meant to be, and it is a rewarding life to be married to your best friend and bosom buddy, and it doesn't hurt that Barbara is insanely beautiful.
So how did you meet Barbara? How'd that story go down?
Well, so we met at a singles party Super Bowl gathering, and I had just been climbing some mountains down in South America and finished that expedition and came back. And so I had my mother's husband had just passed away, and I helped her get settled into her retirement house. So she'd worked in the Bay Area all her life in California, and then I bought a place in Flagstaff, Arizona. And while they were moving, her husband passed away of cancer. So, I quit my job. I was working as a pastor in Colorado, and left that and helped her get settled in. So Mom says, well, hey, why don't you go to the Super Bowl party with me? It's the singles club. So I said, okay, great. I didn't have plans. So we show up, and Barbara walks into the room, and I was just completely smitten. What an amazing woman. It was like you could hear the angels singing hallelujah. And so we got to talking, and we exchanged numbers. We became Patriots fans at that time because it was the same year that Tom Brady won his first Super Bowl. And so we became Tom fans and Patriots fans for that reason. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't have. We might have been Tom haters because we were actually rooting for the Rams that year. and so Barbara and I called her the next day, and then I called her the next day, and I called her the next day, and I've been pretty much calling her every day for 20 years now.
That's awesome.
And it was just a perfect match. Really, really just what a blessing. It does take work. It does take work, that's for sure. And there's a lot of give and take, and a lot of compromise, and a lot of understanding and being patient, and letting someone vent when they need to, and don't try to tandem vent. That doesn't work. Take turns. and so it's been a blessed life. Very, very thankful for that. We don't have children together. We were much older. Barbara's 15 years older than I am. And back when we were in our 40s and 50s, that didn't seem to matter much. But now that she's 75 and I'm 61, that there's a huge difference. But we actually look at that difference as a blessing too. I got this thing where I am young enough and healthy enough that if need be, if something happened, I could just throw her. I could build a little harness and put her on my back, and I can carry her everywhere we need to go so she can see everything she wants to see. And I'll be able to do that.
That's awesome. It's funny, anyone who's out there who actually does the whole marriage advice thing, you might tell me that I'm wrong here, but the biggest thing for me, that if I were to sum up a successful relationship in whatever term, for me, I look at it as I have to love my partner more than I love myself. And if I love my partner more than I obviously have to love myself, but if I love my partner more than I love myself, then it makes that compromise, and it makes all of that so much easier. So anyways, that's probably
Right.
terrible advice, but for
That's
me,
true.
it's been really helpful.
Well, I have a little different take on it, but I like what you're saying too, and I get the point. But if because of my relationship with Jesus, I love myself as much as anybody could love anyone. And if I can love my wife as much as I love myself because Jesus loved me, then that works out magnificently.
Yeah.
And so I'm thankful for how all of those dynamics work out in in heaven and on earth to because heaven on earth truly is being happily married and being able to live the life that you want to live, not the life that you have to live because of economic stresses or whatever, or because of health conditions. Having good health and then having the finances to live the life that you want to live, which is a modest thing, not lavish in our case, is truly heaven on earth. And if heaven is half as good as it is here, then it'll be twice as good as it needs to be for it to be heaven.
Hmm. I like that. I'm gonna have to re-listen to that, do the math, and make sure I fully understand that. But I like that. I want to I don't know if this is a level set or if this is just bring me up to speed. So you've mentioned one that obviously working with your mother there when her spouse passed away, and then that your father's family took you in. Did you maintain a relationship, or did you rebuild a relationship with your birth parents, or what does that look like?
So that evolved and got better over time. Mom and dad were struggling to make their way in life, and then to be able to wrap their mind around not raising their boys. That had to take some serious mental gymnastics and emotional energy to do that. And I was actually not interested in connecting with my parents until after I became a Christian. And it was at that point that I realized that it would be healthier for me and healthier for them, healthier for my children, because children crave grandparents, and they deserve that. Children don't, I don't want to perpetuate a problem by robbing my children of their grandparents. Nip that in the bud. Don't pass that on. I was denied my parents, and I don't want to deny my children their grandparents, because that would just be a terrible, terrible thing. And I would not have thought that way if I hadn't learned to appreciate the way Jesus thinks about life and living, and knowing that Jesus would forgive and try to build relationships despite the hardships that make up our history, that painful past and hurtful history that I referred to on the TV show. So it was a very difficult thing for my mom and dad, and for me. It was awkward, it was challenging, it was emotionally difficult. But in time, it worked. And then eventually my older brother also became a Christian after years of trying life other ways. And then it led him to want to reach out to mom and dad and to build a relationship that was, difficult. And so I'm happy that it all worked out that way. We now, Barbara and I, go on vacations with mom and her boyfriend, who just recently got married. So now they're husband and wife. So over the last 20 years, we have gone on lots of vacations together and spent holidays. So, making up for what was lost is not a reality or a possibility in this lifetime. Can't go back and feel like I was raised by my mom and dad, and that they were at every ball game and at every parent teacher conference and were with me at every milestone in my life. can't go back and make that happen, but I can make memories that I can look back on for the rest of my life and be thankful for that.
Yeah, that decision, when you mentioned you had a conversion and then you decided to work on that relationship. Was that decision to work on that relationship, did it happen kind of as an overnight thing? Was there some sort of experience that spurred you in that direction, or was it kind of a slow awakening, as like you mentioned with children and your own family, that you realized it would probably be beneficial to try and repair that?
So it really did all kind of come together. Um, a lot of life um, landmarks came together at one time. My wife and I were expecting our first child. And so then I felt like in order for my child to have a happy home and a happy life, I need to be a Christian like my uncle. So then that's when I reached out to Jesus and made that connection. And then at the same time with that came, wanting to look at who I am as a person and what I need to do in order to be the best person, so I can be a great husband and a great father to my children. And this is a lot. I was only 22 years old at the time, and that's a lot for a 22-year-old fella coming from my background to wrap your mind and heart around. And so being in that, focusing on that relationship with Jesus enabled me to make decisions that I probably never would have. I probably wouldn't have connected with my parents. I might have still been bitter and angry about that. And then that would have been miserable for my children. I doubt that my wife and children would have loved me anyhow as a person, because I was pretty jacked up, from the way things had gone in my life up to that point. And I needed a lot of healing and a lot of changes, and I need to evolve as a person. And so connecting with Jesus in that way enabled me to be the kind of father that my children can love, to be the kind of person that my wife could love. And then here's my parents. I want my kids to have grandparents. And I actually want to have parents too. And I want to be able to call somebody mom. I want to be able to call somebody dad and have that mean something deeply and wonderfully, and have that be a beautiful thing. I wanted that, and I didn't have it. And my aunt and uncle, they were, Aunt Monty and Uncle H.O. They weren't mom and dad, and I couldn't go there with them. And so there was a lot of wonderful, meaningful, powerful things that happened all in a short amount of time, I'd say within a year. But yeah, it all just converged and fortunately happened in a way that was the best thing for me.
Well, that's awesome. It's interesting when you look at anyone who follows you, and obviously you can see this from the show, but if you're someone who follows Mike and you see his stuff, you can see that you appear to be a very happy person, and you appear to be someone who has been able to successfully navigate those challenges and overcome the feelings that would be easy to dwell on and to live with. And so you mentioned your uncle. Is that the uncle that you lived with, who helped you see in whatever way that you needed to make some changes, or was this a different uncle?
Yeah, it's the very same one. When I was kicked out of the orphanage, it was him and his wife that took me into their family in Colorado when I was 15, and they had children my age. My cousin and I are more like brothers because we grew up together as teenagers, and then of course my cousin Ginger. So I have a sister that I never had, because there was just the three boys. So yeah, the same uncle, who was a great Christian, great outdoorsman, yeah, definitely helped me see a path that I was willing to follow. And I'm so thankful that I did.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like when you went into their home, they were already religious and spiritual people, and how did they handle that with you, if I can ask, coming in from your background and your experience, were they just, hey Mike, we love you, and we're gonna go do this thing on Sunday and whatnot, or did they, I mean, how did they involve you in that when you were young in their home, and how did that, I guess, translate when you were 22?
Right. So at 15, it was the, being in an orphanage where there's 1,000 boys and just counselors who do their 8-hour shift and leave. So there's not a whole lot of connecting in meaningful, heartfelt ways with adults because there's just too many of us. Most of us were unlovely little things, and I had perfected being unlovely apparently because the orphanage kicked me out. And so I did not have a favorable opinion of adults. I actually believed that once you got old enough, you became an ogre and just unfit for the human race, and that that the world would be better off if adults would self-destruct by the time they got to that point where they no longer thought like a young man and started thinking like an adult. Then they should just self-eliminate. And I
Huh.
really believed that. And so then when I started living with this family, I was like, these guys are different. They're happy, they're loving, they liked me, they thought I was smart and clever and gifted, and we were in a rural area, and so there was ranchers and farmers all around the area, and so these guys would invite me to come and drive their tractor, and they were just treating me like a grown up, and they weren't treating me like a nuisance or like something that they put up with because they're getting paid. And so I started to form a totally different opinion about adults. And when I first got there, I literally knew nothing about Jesus. Even though Boys Town is a Catholic institution, the element or aspect of Jesus and God and creation and eternal life to come and all that, none of that really was evident to me. And I never cued in on it. And so I was still quite ignorant as to these things. And so when I first got there, they kept talking about Jesus. And at first I thought, well, I don't see Jesus, but they talk about him all the time. And then I thought, well, maybe there was a building down the road or something, and he lived in there. Maybe he was on a life support machine or something. And I had no idea who this Jesus was. They just had this invisible friend. But I really liked their invisible friend because I associated with them being nice, kind, loving, wonderful people to be around, who loved and adored me and appreciated me and made me feel great. I associated all of that with Jesus. And so at that point, whoever Jesus was, I liked it. I liked him. And then the longer I stayed with them, I started to realize that it wasn't a fictional story, that there really is a God who created everything, keeps everything alive and all the natural laws working so that we could, live on this planet and be, and achieve peace of mind and happiness here if we live in harmony with the way we were designed. If you take a diesel engine as an example, it was designed to run on diesel, but if you put gasoline in it, it's going to run hot and seize up. It's not the gasoline's fault. It's the fact that the engine was designed to live on or to run on diesel. And in the same way, we were designed to run on righteousness. We weren't designed to run on sin. So if we live in a way that is contrary to the way we were designed to live and experience peace and happiness, then it's going to be struggle after struggle after struggle if we pour in gasoline where we should be pouring in diesel. So I got that, and it made sense. And so then, 7 years later, by the time I was 22, I was ready to go all in, and so that I could provide a family for my children the way my uncle provided a family for me. So I just knew that Jesus had to be involved, and so that's the way I went.
That's interesting. And I guess, how is your journey of faith evolving today? As you look back and as you look forward and your experiences, how are you still evolving and changing and growing, do you think?
Just every day, Jesus seems more real, more personal, more a fact, and less, and not just all faith. It just seems. I mean, at this point in my life, Jesus is as real to me as my wife is, or as you are way over there on the other side of the phone. Even though I can't see you or touch you, you're a real person, and that even though I can't see and touch Jesus, he's a real person, and everything that he taught while he was here makes sense, because when I personally choose to live in harmony with the way he said is best to live, because that's how we were designed to live, every time I put to test what he commanded or recommended in the Bible, when I choose to live that way, the fact is I do feel my best. I'm at peace. In difficult times, I'm able to get along, despite the difficult times. And I've learned that peace and pain cohabitate in the hearts of those who love and live according to God's will. And that's evidence in and of itself that if Jesus says, if you do this, you're going to be a happy camper. And then when you do it and you are a happy camper, well, there's the proof. And so if I can trust him on this one and this one, I should be able to trust him on these other things that he's talked about. And so I've found that every time I've trusted him and incorporated in my life what he has said would be best, every time I find it to be that much better, and I'm much happier because of it. So I continue to grow, continue to believe, and continue to be blessed. And one of the greatest things is knowing that all of our loved ones who pass, on TV, I mentioned that my daughter passed when she was 10. And knowing that I'll see her again, fantastic. It is a feeling that you cannot possibly articulate with words, but you can certainly feel it to the core of your soul. And it's a fantastic thing to know that I'll see my little lady again someday. I'd hate to do life without that.
Yeah, amen. Yeah, yeah, it's something that I guess you can't really describe it. You have to experience it to know. But it's
Yeah,
there, and it's there for us, right?
it definitely is. Yeah, definitely is. And thank you, Jesus, that it is a reality, and it's ours to live with.
No, I appreciate you sharing that, and obviously knowing that was one of those questions that was out there. I was curious to see if and how that would come up. So thank you for sharing and opening up with that. It's
Mm-hmm.
Life is
You're
difficult,
quite
man.
welcome.
It's a difficult thing, but it's also very beautiful. And there's
Yeah, it's amazing.
there's so much here.
You know, one of my reasons, probably my primary reason for consenting to do the show alone, was to demonstrate to the viewing audience that being outside, spending time outdoors in some wholesome way, like surviving off the land, is something that I wanted to inspire people to do more of. So I wanted to represent it being out there as a happy, joyful, triumphant, fabulous thing to do. And I was thankful that in my case, my area was great for surviving. I was able to get firewood and food and water pretty easily. It came quite handily for me. I didn't have to spend tons of time doing it. And so when you watch me on TV, and I just thank the editors of Left Field Productions for how they portrayed my experience out there, because they caught the essence of it, that I truly was blessed and truly was enjoying it and having fun and learning things, and I wasn't suffering. And so people can watch that, and from it, I hope that they would say, "Wow, I want to go spend that kind of time outdoors too." And so, like I said earlier in our conversation here, I travel a lot teaching, so I'm in the airport regularly, going, to catch a plane, and people will see me walking along, and they'll run up to me and say, "Yeah, Mike, what you did out there was just phenomenal." Actually, they didn't usually say Mike because they didn't remember my name, but every once in a while they would.
Barbara's
Dude, what you
husband,
did
right?
out there was exactly Barbara's husband. And so what you did out there was phenomenal. It was amazing. You know what? You inspired me to take my family outdoors. We go camping now, and we spend time out there, and we try to duplicate what we saw you do and what we saw the other folks out there do. People say that what you and Jose did out there was amazing, because both of you were crafting things and making stuff, and it was just thrilling, watching you guys do what you did out there. And now, we attend primitive skills gatherings because of that, and how cool, and just thank you for turning us on to that. And to hear people say that is just like eating dark chocolate after I got off the show. It was wonderful.
Yeah, and you have to earn it, right? You have to earn the taste for dark chocolate by growing up a little bit, just like you had to earn those feelings of gratitude.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. There is a certain degree of earning a reward. If you're just given everything, then that level of appreciation doesn't exist, or that contrast with not having it and then having it after a lot of saving up and hard work. You're right. Things like that are earned in life's experiences, and to be one of the very few. There's 7.5 billion people on this planet, and then not that was the pool from which Left Field drew on to find people for the show, but there's tens of thousands of people who want to be on this show, and then I was selected, and I will never ever take that for granted of how fortunate I was and how blessed I was. And I know all the others feel the same way, that it was truly a privilege, but it was also a responsibility, to take that time and to spend it in a way that is meaningful and valuable for the viewers. And that's the teacher coming out of me. I mean, I truly did not do it to satisfy some unmet need in my own life. I did not need that. What I needed to do was to showcase survival and living outdoors in a way that people would be inspired to do the same. And so that's why I was very serious about it. There are complaints, though, that sometimes you hear. It's like on social media early on, people would say, "Well, dude, if you knew you were going to miss your wife out there, then you shouldn't have gone out there. You should have saved that spot for somebody else, somebody who was willing to fight tooth and nail and to suffer through whatever in order to win the show." And, people could actually get upset, that I made a decision to go home on day 21. They felt like I was disrespecting the opportunity, disrespecting the challenge. And I suppose in depending on how you look at the challenge, there's some validity to that, but in my mind, there is life, and then there's a TV show. And my life, I need to be able to have good health, to live a long life, so that I can continue to be a blessing to my wife, number one, my children, my grandchildren. And so I did not want to squander my health by pushing through malnutrition and starvation at age 55. I was unwilling to do that because I have a higher priority, and that's my family. And in order to be there for my family, I wanted to be healthy, strong. And I have this theory that all of us are born with a certain amount of vital force, kind of like a battery. And you can make that last a long time by living carefully, or you could use it up and die young. And so I made a decision when I was 15 years old. My uncle was 60 at the time when he took me in, and yet he was more active and stronger and healthier, had more endurance than I did at 15. So I made a decision to imitate his lifestyle choices, and he was a vegetarian at the time. And that's when I chose to be a vegetarian, was when I was 15. Back in 75, that was a weird thing. Going through being a survival instructor in the Air Force in the 80s, that was a really weird thing. Most of my friends didn't quite get it. And then, of course, when I am surviving off the land and for the TV show, I do eat meat. But when I'm just living my life normally, I do not eat meat. And so I did not want to forfeit any of my life. So for the folks who feel like I had disrespected the program by going home early the way I did, I am sorry, but I have to disagree with you on that. And that's cool. You know, we're all entitled to believe what we want about things like that. Shoot, my earbud is about to go out on me, and I can't seem to find the other ones. Oh, wait a minute, I did find it. Here it is.
It's to me, that's been kind of a fun thing about this project and this process of going through is I mean, there's a lot of, I mean, obviously there's always going to be a lot of negativity, right? But
Mm-hmm.
it's just interesting to get to know the other side of the people and understand motivations and feelings and the experiences. So hopefully for me, the concept is that so people will get to understand each other better. Because I think only good things can come from listening and understanding each other, right? So
Yeah, yeah, and for me too. For the folks, one of the unfortunate things that happen on social media when watching people do the alone show their way. They're what motivates them, what drives them, what keeps them hanging in there when they haven't eaten in a while and they're cold, hungry, starving, their clothes aren't fitting. They're afraid that on a medical check they're going to be pulled because their body mass index has dropped to a unacceptable level for continuing. For the folks who, so then because of that, there are people who feel like watching alone is watching people starve to death for money. And that is unfortunate that that's the conclusion they come to, because I don't believe any of the 70 or 80 folks who have done this show truly feel that way. Because maybe early on, I'd love to go, camping and win $500,000 or in Roland's case, $1 million. That might be the initial motivation, but when you're out there, you evolve, your motivation changes to the point where the reason why you're doing it is now more spiritual. And even if you're not a religious person, it's still a spiritual component of who we are as human beings that begs to be acknowledged. And when you're out there, in those circumstances, I can, I would be surprised if there was any one of us who has been on this show who could say after doing it, especially for the folks who went for 60, 70, 80, 90 days, who could say, I was hanging in there because I wanted the money.
Yeah, it's
You
funny. I was
know,
gonna
so
mention a minute ago that the show kind of seems like a pressure cooker, right? If you will, where it's you might come in for whatever reason, but so far everyone I've spoken to, for whatever individual circumstances are, the heat and pressure, if you will, kind of forces some human growth and human understanding and some level of change and certainly I don't think anyone that I've spoken to yet or that I will speak to has come out the same as they were when they went in.
absolutely, there's zero, even for folks who went home on day one or within the first couple weeks. Um, those the change that you experience happens even before you go out and start filming. There is a significant life altering change that happens during the process of getting selected, during the process of training to film properly for the show, and then hanging out with one another. I mean, conversation isn't the same for those of us who are hanging out before we start surviving and filming. You know, it's you know, a lot of life can be mundane. A lot of life can be you know, focused on things that aren't deep and meaningful and life changing. But when you're getting ready to go out and film a TV show like we do, it has a profound effect on you even before you go out there. And then that just continues to accelerate and magnify to the point where you will never ever see life the same again. You will never go into a restaurant and sit down at the table and eat food. You'll never pick up a fork. You'll never drink a glass of water. You'll never drink a glass of juice or alcohol or whatever it is. You'll never go into a store to buy something and feel the same. You will always see the little simple things of life as profound and wonderful. Unfortunately, too many of us in society, and growing up in an affluent country like America or Canada or anywhere else where it's affluent, you take all of these things for granted, and you could try really hard not to. But when you go out in a situation like we do, and then there's other folks, you know, like the folks who do Naked and Afraid, they have a similar evolution, and you will just never take those things for granted ever again. I always marvel now when I go into a store and all of this stuff that I worked so hard to create with my hands out of wood and rocks and weeds and things, you know, to be able to make those to have a comfortable camp. And that was, you know, a thing that I focused on because I had so much free time, is to focus on building a comfortable camp. And after a while, that was what it was, is I was building a palace for Barbara, you know, and I wanted to take her back there and to see that place. Unfortunately, they dismantled it right after I left. You know, my boat, that boat that I was able to build, is nothing compared to what Jose built. I started off with something that was already waterproof and could float. Jose started off with a tarp and created something that could float. And it was just masterful what he did. But my boat was called the USS Barbara. Nobody knew that because that didn't come out on TV, but I christened it the USS Barbara. And so I just don't see things the same way. And I know all of us feel that way. And for that, I'm very thankful. And, you know, Left Field production company may not even be aware the phenomenal difference that they've made in the lives of people by creating an opportunity for us to do this for national and international television. It's one thing to take your camera and go out and film yourself for a YouTube channel. And some people actually build a really great following, like Fowler and Greg Ovens. Their YouTube channels are amazing. Brooke and Dave Whipple
Joe Robinette
are
comes to
some of the
mind.
folks. Yes, Joe is another one. And Donnie Dust too. There's just so many of the folks who are excelling at it. I mean, making thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars through YouTube, but being able to be on the History Channel, and then to know that is just going to go worldwide. Other folks are going to, in different countries, are going to buy it and air it in their country, and either they'll put subtitles in or they'll do voiceovers. You should hear what we sound like in Japanese. and to know that, and to know that part of them preparing us to be on this show was to prepare us for all of the attention that it's going to draw and steer toward us. That there are going to be people out there talking about us. There's going to be people say, I like Mike, I like her, I like him, I like what they did. And then people are going to feel privileged to talk to you, and people are going to feel giddy around you because they saw you on TV. There's that kind of that fame element that is not normally associated in my life, but because people see me on TV, there's that dynamic that exists, and you want to respect that because this is something, for these people who are watching us and they have these feelings for us, even though they've never met us, and that when they do reach out to you, you owe it to them to be kind and loving and appreciative because you made an impact on their life to the point where they wanted to reach out and say so. And so they taught us about all of that and prepared us for it. And so it's a gift, it's a responsibility, a privilege, and I want to do my very best to honor that.
Well, I'm grateful that they did give you guys that little chat, and I'm grateful that you're trying to honor it because here we are today, right? So
Yeah,
I'm
that's true.
glad,
Right
and I
on.
will I will say that so far everyone that I've spoken to are, whether that be people that I've recorded and that we've released, or people that I'm working with to speak to, because there's like I think like nine, I've got nine more lined up at this point. Um, to
Nice.
a person, great, great, fantastic people, and it's really been fantastic. But you mentioned how you don't take things for granted anymore, and I know that you mentioned you're still getting ready to listen to Britt's episode, but one of the funny things that came from that conversation with Britt that I need to tell him he needs to make t-shirts is, basically don't tell Britt that you're starving or that you're freezing, because there's a whole different element, to those words, and he's experienced that. So so that's something for him that he doesn't take for granted. And we had that conversation as well of, what is it like to have nothing for such a long period of time, and then to come back to having everything. Like you mentioned, you go to the store and you spend hours or days building a chair or whatever, right? And then you can just go to the store
Hmm.
and buy one for $20, right? It's got to be kind of
Yeah,
a
yeah.
surreal experience. And for me, I mentioned this with Jose as well, that something that I try and do. It's super simple, and it seems kind of dumb and maybe kind of crazy, but I will try and say, you know what? It's cold outside, it's snowing, it's whatever, but I'm just running errands, or I'm just going to be outside for 5 minutes. I'm not going to wear a coat. I'm just going to, be alive and
Mm,
experience that. And so while I've never been on, nor will I ever be on something such as Alone, I'm trying to find little ways to keep in touch with the reality of life, and not being comfortable all the time, and not, not needing to be
mm,
perfect for every minute of every day to just keep in touch with that side, you know?
That's a good thing, and I appreciate you take it as a takeaway from watching Alone is to be in that frame of mind, and this kind of goes along the thinking of being prepared if the grid shuts down. You know, it's like, how are we as a society where we've grown accustomed to flipping the switch or opening the refrigerator or hopping in our car and turning the ignition on and driving away? What if none of that were available to us for an extended period of time? What if the grid shut down for, let's say, a month? If you read the information and what people have deduced under that scenario, what could happen? There's the 90-90 outlook is that if the grid shut down for 90 days, 90% of the population would be dead.
Hmm.
That is grueling to think of. But if they can't bring stuff to the stores and you don't know how to get it from the wilderness, then 90% of the people are going to perish within 90 days of a grid shutdown because they don't know what to do. And so if you've ever watched the Mad Max type shows, when that happens, look what happened at the most recent market crash in '08. You probably heard of all the people who committed suicide because they lost all their assets,
Yep.
Basically overnight, and they made a decision to kill themselves because they couldn't imagine living without that wealth. And I mean, how many people would fight to live if the grid shut down for a long period of time when they don't have food, they don't have water, they don't have clothing, they don't have heat, they don't have transportation, they don't have internet, they can't, all the gamers can't do their games now. All that quits. And I could tell you how hard it is to have nothing but free time all day long, how difficult it is to beguile those hours to occupy that time. It is very, very, very difficult when you have food, firewood, and water and shelter all locked in for that day, how hard it is to do something for the rest of that day and then all that night too before you fall asleep. So most people would not do well in an affluent nation. And so the idea that 90% of the people would die within those first 90 days is not hard to believe now that I've been on Alone. So what we need to do is anticipate that and mitigate it by learning how to prepare when the grid shuts down. So how to live off the land with and without lots of tools. So you should be able to do it with nothing. You should be able to do it easier with a knife. You should be able to do it easier with snare wire. You should be able to do it easier with rope. You should be able to do it easier with a gun and a bow and ammunition and arrows and a shelter already picked out. You should, and all the clothing you need to get through that kind of a situation. And then to be able to defend and protect that stuff from people who didn't and now want to come and take it from you. You need to be able to protect that and preserve that for your family. And so this whole prepper mindset is a legitimate concern, even if the grid only shuts down for 3 weeks. What are you going to do during those 3 weeks? Think of all the people on the 25th floor in New York City when the grid shuts down and they don't have a way to get electric heat now, and it's in the wintertime. You hear about it every winter where people die because the grid shut down and they didn't have a backup. And then, the people die in their homes.
Hey man,
So let's not be those.
I lived on the 4th floor of a condo, and I tell you what, when that elevator was down, I thought that the world was coming to an end.
Right, and that's a
lugging
minor
groceries up
thing,
4
but
stories.
oh yeah, Yeah, and praise God that you were still able to get groceries.
Right.
So
Well,
yeah,
this,
I mean, we can't just continue to take this stuff for granted. We should be very, very, very thankful. Part of what my wife and I have done to be prepared, but not to take it too far. You know, I want to live a normal life too, but then I want to be prepared to maintain that normal life if the grid should shut down. And so my wife and I are almost done for the last 3 years. 3 winters, we've been building an off-grid home in southeast Arizona. And so we are not dependent on any outside utilities in order to live. And so we have, enough food stored up, enough ammo, and enough wherewithal to survive off the land from our stored food, and to be able to get by for a year if we had to.
that's awesome.
And so and I realized that's not available to everybody. So then just at the beginning of time, we had nothing. So learn how to survive off the land with nothing. You should be able to make stone tools. So now you got a knife. So now you're hundreds of years ahead of where man was originally. And now you need to know how to make your own bows and arrows and cordage so that you could take down animals and you can feed your family and live out there. So you should, even if you can't have your own property and have everything equipped so that you can live off the grid for a year or more, you should be able to live off the land. And this is where knowing how to survive comes in handy, having a bug out bag, so that you've got some equipment to make surviving off the land a lot easier. But what if you can't take that bug out bag with you? What if someone takes it from you and you're left with nothing? You should be able to live off the land. And you owe that to yourself. You owe that to our Creator. You owe that to your family. You owe it to your friends. You owe it to your community to be skilled enough to provide for your family, to provide for the tribe, and to live well, not to just scrape by, but to survive and thrive. That's what we owe for the gift of life. We need to preserve and protect that gift with every possible way. And then there's people who can't because they're physically handicapped or they're elderly. Not only should you be able to take care of yourself, but you should be able to take care of them too.
Certainly. And this seems like a perfect spot to transition then and say, what, if you want to talk about Wilderness Way and what you're doing and how you can or do help provide that training for people and what that looks like for you.
Wilderness Way is just one of many excellent ways that people can learn about wilderness survival. There's some excellent YouTube videos out there, lots and lots and lots of them. Even from the ones that don't seem all that good, you could still learn something from it, maybe how not to do something. And so take the time. Of course, there's books, and then when you start getting into it, maybe you're just self-motivated and I'm just going to read books and watch videos. I'm just going to go out and learn from that. But eventually you're going to want to hang out with like-minded people, and then you can go to gatherings. There's plenty of primitive skills gatherings that happen throughout the country. And so you can start going to those and then meet people like you and learn from them. You can share what you've learned. And so with Wilderness Way itself, there's myself and my 2 partners, and I do primarily the wilderness survival teaching, and then my other partners do the search and rescue elements of being outdoors. So using ropes and rafts to rescue people who are stranded in the wilderness. And so you just simply, either on Facebook or online, go to the wildernesswayadventures.com website. And if if you prefer faith-based, Christ-centered wilderness survival environment to learn skills, then give me a call. And if faith and a relationship with Jesus isn't your thing, and a lot of people still attend, because you're going to get good skills. It's not just all about, reading the Bible and praising God. It's genuinely, we spend 99% of our time hardcore learning skills. And you're going to be good at learning how to rub two sticks together to make a fire. You're going to know how to build a shelter, how to find water and make it safe to drink, the edible plants, and make a bow and use traps and snares to catch animals so that you can have food and hides for clothing and other things. You're gonna learn all of that. And then also you could visit us at our what we call the roundhouse. We actually made an earth bag house, just took adobe clay, and that's what our house is made out of. And see how to live off the grid and learn prepper techniques and ideas. And so that's available to people who are interested. And like I was going to say, if the fact that I include Jesus as part of what we do, if that's offensive to you, then there's plenty of excellent programs out there where you could learn skills. And so reach out and do that, and take your responsibility as being an adult and a provider, and so that if the grid should shut down, there's no surprise, because there's no handicap, because you are taught and skilled and can get by without the grid. And that's the person you want to be. It really, there's a sense of satisfaction. There's a sense of a healthy type of pride that makes you a better, decent, more compassionate person. And it's well worth it to take the time to learn those skills for all the above reasons.
Well, Mike, I appreciate you sharing all of that and sharing everything you have with us today. I will go ahead and link your website and your public pages in the show notes for those that are interested in finding those. You can link right over to Mike and find him readily. But as we're kind of wrapping up, I just want to give you the opportunity, if there's anything else that you want to share, if there's something that I've missed that you want to put out there, any last words for us before we wrap up.
I'd like to share two stories from being on Alone that I think are great takeaways. And while I was out there, I was catching several different species of fish in my gill net, and it had been a few days since I caught one of my favorite fish. So I was sitting on my little meditation spot and looking out over the bay, the little cove where I was, and I see this rogue wave making its way toward me. And I had just prayed to God, please, I would love my favorite little fish. It was the ratfish. It's kind of like a shark. And so here comes this rogue wave across the cove, and it curls and crashes on the beach. And when that water receded, it left one of those fish for me, flopping. Ran over and hit it with my stick, and I had an answer to my prayer. I got my favorite fish. I just love that story. I wish I filmed the whole thing, and unfortunately didn't make it on television, but it was very endearing and heartwarming to pray for something, and then God provided in that really cool way. Just brought that fat fish in on a rogue wave and deposited it right on the shore, right where I was sitting. And then the other one is I had been using my jacket as a pillow. And, I sleep with two objectives in mind, apparently. One, to get rest, and the other is to exercise, because I just toss and turn all night long, my poor wife. And so my pillow would come undone. So I'd have to wake up, 5 or 6 times a night, refold it, and then tuck it under my head. So one morning I just woke up and I said, Father, I would love a pillow. Please give me a pillow. 2 hours later, I was beachcombing down around the cove where I could look out and see the Pacific Ocean. And there was this log that at low tide would be above water and high tide would be underwater. So it was low tide, and here was a pillow sitting on top of that log. And I ran over, I grabbed it, drained the water out, it got it as dry as I could, and then I had a pillow for the rest of my time out there. And I called it my Preg 4 pillow. And was I ever excited about that?
Do
So
you still have that pillow?
I moved. You know what? They wouldn't let me have
Oh,
it. There was some things they did let me have, but most of it, I don't even know why. So I saw where folks did bring home a lot of the stuff that they crafted, but that pillow was one of them I couldn't take.
huh.
It came from Japan, by the way, because just before we went out, I think was it 2011 was when the Fukushima event happened with the earthquake and the tsunami and all that,
Mm-hmm.
and all that stuff went out into the ocean. And we were there in 2015 was the year that we were filming, and that stuff was still drifting up on the island coming from Japan. And so the pillow I had Japanese writing on it.
That's fantastic.
And
Well,
unfortunately, that didn't make it on TV either. So one of these days I'll have to ask the lead editor. It's like, okay, so why this? Don't know if they'll remember enough about it to be able to answer it, but it's like, why'd you leave that out? That was actually pretty cool. So I'm just curious and see what they say.
yeah, I kind of distracted from there. I think obviously the point you're getting at is that God is great and God provides, right? And if you have that
Yes.
faith and that trust, so I didn't mean to, and I kind of derailed that thought there, but um, I think I'm assuming that's what you were getting at, and certainly
Yes.
I
Yes.
think that's true.
How how cool it is to ask and to receive. I did ask for a whole bunch of other stuff and never got it, but I'm okay with that too.
Yeah, there's also
I
that side that sometimes we're not ready for that thing, right? So,
well, I don't drink alcohol, but a can of beer did wash up, and I kept thinking, man, I wish I could have given this to one of the other guys. And then the other thing I prayed for every day was, Father, can you just like have a pizza drift in one of these days? That never happened.
that's funny. Well, Mike, I really appreciate this time. It's been a pleasure to visit and to get to know you and to hear your experiences in your life. And hopefully, like you talked about people knowing you, that now that we've had this conversation, people can feel like they know you a little bit better and feel a little bit closer to you. So thank you so much, and I look forward to following and seeing what you do in the future.
All right, Sam. Thank you for having me, and I look forward to listening to this again with my wife, and then listening to the rest of the ones that you do. And hopefully, you'll be able to get a hold of everybody and do it, because this is a wonderful thing that you're doing. So
Well,
God bless you, brother.
I appreciate that, and back at you, and you take care.
All righty, man. Bye bye.
Bye.